Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Asus Republic of Gamers Mars card, and it's actually a dual 760. Now there's been a lot of people wondering why this is a dual 760 card and not a dual 780 card, which is kind of what we would have been expecting of old, because the old Marses were the big fully fledged all singing, all dancing cards, and whereas before, like the 690 was kind of it was a hybrid chip on there. Essentially what the Marses used to do, like the original one was two fully fledged 285s on there. I actually had a chance to water cool one of those, and it was a dual PCB where the water block was actually sandwiched in the middle. It was a nightmare to take apart, and they've always been very limited, and they've always had a massive price tag as well. Now, rumours, you know, because people aren't really saying too much, but people are actually saying it's an NVIDIA restriction. So Asus have kind of yomped on and waded in with the dual 760. Now, we have had dual smaller cards in the past. I think there was a dual 560 version. But this is just Asus doing what they do best, really, and doing something slightly different. Now, many people may think, oh, you know, I'd rather have a 780 version, but I'm going to say right at the very beginning, would you really have rather have had a dual 780 version? And by that do I mean, were you actually going to go and buy it, or was it just because you'd like to see what it could do? Now, in that respect, that's fine, but you can't give Asus grief really for not making something that you only wanted to look to see how it performed anyway. This is going to be coming in, the manufacturer, the MRSP, the manufacturer's recommended retail price is going to be £519, which we will talk about more once we look at the performance and we look at the specifications and stuff in a minute, because on paper, other than the memory bus, it looks like it should perform like a 780. But as this review progresses, I do have some surprising numbers for you. Now, we've got it in the rig there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you in for a close-up look at just the card, so we can get the nerd porn stuff out the way. Then I will show you the test rig that we're running today, and then we'll go in, I'll show you those surprising benchmark scores, and we will get everything wrapped up at the end in a nice, lovely, big, juicy conclusion, because I do have a fair amount to say on it. So without further ado, I'm going to shut my mouth and I'm going to bring you in for your first look at the card. Okay then peeps, so look at the box. Whereas you've already seen it already, I have already got it out of the box anyway, but when you open it up, it does tell you about the direct CU side of things. It says it's 20% cooler, highly conductive copper pipes, and they do go, there's 4 on each side that go into direct contact with the GPU. It's got Digi VRM and Super Alloy power. You get GPU tweak in the box, and they say it's 7% faster than a GTX Titan. Well, everything at the moment says it's faster than a Titan. But what we're going to do is it's just more there about the direct CU and like an exploded diagram. But what we're going to do is we are going to bring it in for our first look. Now, if you follow me on Facebook, Facebook/TinyTomLogan, you would have seen that we've been leaking pictures of this for a little while, and I got in a lot of trouble about it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to you about some of the stuff now. It has 4 GB of onboard VRAM, and it is 4 GB, even though Asus will try and tell you it's 6 GB, and there is a little bit of an error. This is their PDF that they sent me, and I printed the page out because it says there 6004 MB of GDR5 at 1501 MHz. But if you have a look, the memory clock is 6004 MHz. 1500 MHz GDR5. See? Now what they've actually done is it is a mistake. It's not 6004 MB, it's 2 GB per core. So there's 4 GB total. So this is actually wrong. But then what we can also see is that the base clock is 1006 MHz, boost clock is 1188 MHz. Where is it? 512-bit memory interface, 256-bit per GPU. It's all kind of muchness, and it's why people are expecting it to be very much like this 780. Now, on the back, I just want to show you quickly, while I've got my chatting about features head on, we've got POS caps around the back. Now, these are lower power, enhanced overclocking and improved stability according to Asus. Inside it's got DigiVRM with 12-phase super alloy power, enhanced super alloy power chokes, capacitors and MOSFETs, and it's got black metallic caps in there as well. There are capacitors, are Japan-made black metallic capacitors, and then Nichicon GT series, and these apparently offer 20% lower temperature and endurance. I'm going to leave it there anyway. And they reckon they'll last 5 times longer than normal. So, what we do need to show is this here actually lights up red. Now, where it's direct CU, you can see the heat pipes at either end, and they loop round and go into direct contact with each one of the cores. And then you've essentially got a fan for each one of them. Now, I didn't expect it to do very well, but you'll see later on it's quite surprising. You can see the design more that side. It's very open. All the heat does go into the rig. I'll give you a slightly better look inside. The power is kind of all in the centre section here. And you can see where the GPUs are, where that larger bit of alloy is, where the pipes go into on either side. And the Mars does kind of hide a lot of it, but there is a big alloy plate in the middle which touches in with all the memory and everything. And then also this back plate, this aluminium back plate on the back. Again, you can see the 2 cores either side. It does keep it all very rigid. In the rig, as you'll see in a minute, it doesn't droop or wallow or anything like that. We've got 2 8-pin powers on this side, which obviously is going to give us plenty of power going in. But something that we do need to kind of mention is it's got an SLI connector. Now, there's already 2 cards on this, and if you were to buy a normal 760, you can only SLI it with one other card. But this does open up being able to add another Mars in, which would be quad SLI. You would have to be quite insane to do that, as I will explain later on. But anyway, we will move around to the back, because this is actually slightly different as well, because we've got a mini display port and then 3 DVIs. Normally we have 2 DVIs, and then there's display ports and HDMIs and all kinds of stuff. There is an adapter in the box which goes from DVI to HDMI should you want to use it. But anyway, that is that. Now, I thought we'd also try something slightly different, and that's kind of, it's a dual GPU card, and then I'd wanted to, and I know I can only rest it on these because it's not raised up, but it was to kind of raise some points that I will mention later on in the review about the ability to use this with other motherboards. Now, obviously, with an M80X board, if you wanted to SLI, you could do, but like I said, you would need your brain testing. On the Gene here, you could easily run that in your PCI Express 3 slot. This is actually a PCI Express 2 slot, so you could drop a sound card into this if you wanted. I know we've got the Supreme FX, but again, maybe you want a RAID card or something in there, but it does open up that kind of ability. The cooler does perform really well, so in a smaller case like this, it would still cope pretty well. You'd still be fine. But in the Asus motherboard theme, something else which I do wonder whether some of you would have thought about. Now, we've got the baby impact here. Everyone, 1, 2, 3. Ah, isn't it pretty? So little and dinky. Now, if we drop this on, one thing that we do need to kind of point out, because I'm going to have to hold it still, is this does come off the bottom of your M8, your ITX, because the PCI slot is right at the very bottom. So you need to make sure that you've got an extra PCI Express slot in your case for this. You also need to then remember that this, if your case stops right after that slot, then it's going to be you're going to need to think about airflow and stuff basically. But essentially you could have this power coupled up with your impact. Now I have got here, which I will be doing a video of very shortly, a full motherboard water block for that impact. And by full motherboard, I mean it calls the CPU, the chipset, and this raised power regulator section at the top where all the MOSFETs and caps and everything is, and it does all of it. So you could, for argument's sake, have your Mars in there running on air, and then have everything else water cooled, and it all still remain pretty cool and quiet, and pretty damn cool as well, because obviously ITX cases don't have an enormous amount of water cooling options available to them. So, you know, you can kind of go one or the other, or you end up kind of sacrificing. But again, I'm kind of ranting here. But I just wanted to show you how it could end up possibly looking, and I will try. There we go. And show you it all kind of hooked up. It does come right off the bottom. Right off the bottom. So, like I said, that's the bottom of the motherboard. That's going to be the extra slot. So, like I said, I just wanted to show you that in there, because it might not be the type of thing that you're going to get shown everywhere else. And as I have it here, I thought it would be rude not to, and I really need to have a look before I move this stuff about how it looks on the screen. It obviously does look enormous hanging off the end of that. So just for those of you out there with smaller cases and you're wondering how big this card is, it's 280 millimeters long. So you've got the info there that you can kind of work it out as well. But again, if you have a look at it compared to the M80X, it will give you another kind of idea on sizes and stuff like that. But I think the kind of theme and everything all does go quite nicely, lovely, jubbly well together. So now it will be time for you to show it, for me to show you it, I should say, in the Rampage 4 Extreme, which is what we are going to be testing it on today, all housed in a lovely 750D. So 9 minutes and 30 seconds just into this section alone. I'm going to shut my mouth and move swiftly on. Okie dokie then, boys and girls. So moving on to the rig altogether. I seem to have started to use the 750D a lot more recently, because it's not so gargantuan as the 900D, but there's still, as you can see, ample room in there. That's the original red Rampage Extreme. We've got a 3960X in there at 4.6 gigahertz. That's Corsair Vengeance Pro memory, 2400 megahertz. We've got a H100i there in the roof with SP120 fans. We've got the AX1200i in the bottom with red individually braided cables. Solid state drive is a 240 gigabyte GTX Neutron. And then the front and the rear fan are the new Corsair AF LED red fan as well. And then obviously we've got the Mars in there taking pride of place in the middle. Now I went for this because it all does match, even down to the colour of the logo on the solid state drive is black and red. It's black and red wherever I could get possible. But then also what I wanted to do was be able to kind of show you it at night as well, because obviously I know that's, you know, going to be pretty dark for you. In fact, what I'm going to try and do is bring the system round so that you can see the, I'm kicking my chair and everything. So you can see the red fans as well. At the front, I've pulled the flap off the 750, by the way, but obviously we've got the H100 lit up red. But another reason why I wanted to show you this at night is to show you that throbbing Mars logo. But I did take some pictures of this with the with Corsair Dominator Platinum with the light bars on, and I've gone over to the red LED Pro, no, the red LED, the red Vengeance Pro now, just for that extra little splash of red. But let me know what you think of it all together. Is like a system, as for kind of like maybe some inspiration or something. Obviously the window that goes on the side of the 750 is rather massive. And I don't know what I've done with the screw. There it is. There we go. So that's it now with the window fitted. I know the front's off, but like I said, I just wanted to be able to show you the LEDs. There we go. I personally think it needs another little flash of light somewhere. A subtle bit of white light, I personally think that needs, if I was going to run it myself. But anyway, there that is. Enough of that. We need to start talking about some performance numbers, and also so I can stop kicking the tripod and unwrap my microphone cable because it's all caught up around the leg. So I'm going to stop the camera quickly now and we will move swiftly on. Okay then peeps, so moving on to some performance results and benchmarks. One thing I will say is don't forget to click the link to go and have a look at the main review, because in that you can see this compared with all of the cards, including the AMD cards, and see everything in the graphs. Yes, I know people keep saying about putting them in order. We are working on that because we do want to sack off the flash. But anyway, it's a work in progress. At the moment, I'm too busy making reviews for you lot. Anyway, so we've got 3 results on the screen. One of those is the Mars, one of those is the MSI 780 Gaming, and one of those is the stock GTX 780 Ti. Now I would assume that anyone that's kind of well versed in all this stuff will assume that this is the Ti, and you'd be correct. Then I think you'll probably assume that this is the Mars and that this is the MSI 780. Well, actually, quite surprisingly, you'd be wrong, because a lot of people seem to assume that this is just going to be around and about the performance of a 780. Well, just to throw a spanner in the works, it's actually around and about the performance of a 780 Ti. It beats the 780 in pretty much, no, it beats the 780 in everything, especially benchmarks. Now, so obviously we've got a 500 point difference here, and that's actually, for Firestrike Extreme, is a huge gap, and I mean an absolutely monstrous gap. But you can open that gap up even further if you wish, because you can overclock it, and then you get that. And I know I'm showing you lots of screenshots, but you can go from 4,914 up to 5,494. So you actually get a 500 point boost by overclocking this thing. Now, the Nvidia cards do respond very well to overclocking. The Ti actually practically broke the 6,000 mark when it did it. But for a couple of 760s to be punting out scores like that is absolutely epic. But what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to close all these, and I'm going to do it with you live on screen, because what a lot of people don't realise is because of the amount of flack I get about some of the results, I keep screenshots of fucking everything. What we're going to do now is go to 3D Mark Vantage X. Do-do-boo-doo-boo. Boo-boo-doo-boo-doo-boo. 3D Mark Vantage X, there we go. Right, and this is where things get confusing. In fact, I may need to just make doubly sure we're in stock. We are in fact in stock. Right, so this is where things get confusing. So they're all in the same place again. We've got the Mars, we've got the 780 Gaming, then we've got the 780 Ti. And what you will see is the stock 760 SLI Mars actually scores more than the 780 Titanium or Ti, whatever you want to call it. And this is one of the things that we found quite surprising, that some of the benchmarks it's near enough the score, and in other benchmarks it can actually open that gap up. And again, what I will show you is that 31,018. If you overclock the card, and I just need to look it up, 3D Mark Vantage X, there you go. If you overclock the card, you can open that up to practically 34,000 points. So you've got there 33,892. And one of the reasons why I keep screenshots of everything is just plain and simple, so that I've got a reference point I can go back when I start overclocking to make sure I'm not pushing stuff too far. But if we close all these again, I'm going to show you another X score, and the reason why I'm showing you X scores is because that's the one that really kind of separates the men from the boys. 3D Mark 11X, there we go. Move this one along. And grab this one again, 3D Mark 11X. There we go. So 3D Mark 11X, again, another ridiculous score. And I've even had to just go and make sure that everything is in the stock folder there as well. 5,509 for the Mars, 4,733 for the 780 gaming. The only reason why I use the MSI card is because that's the best kind of out-the-box 780 that we got. It's also the best overclocking one that I've had the privilege of working with. And then a stock 780 Ti is 51,082. Now again, I'm going to show you, if we go back, 3D Mark 11P, 3D Mark 11X. Now this is the Mars card. So you can go from a 5,509 up to an X score of 6,091. So there's some good overclocking to be had there. Now one thing I will say is, and I do need to say it, is when with the overclock results and the FPS results, they stayed relatively consistent, as in when it comes to games it didn't really give you much of a boost. Not as much of a boost that we saw with the 780 Ti anyway, and that's really just an architecture limitation when it comes to the games more than anything else. If you want to overclock to get better frames per second, then the Ti will actually pull in front by a noticeable difference. But the Mars does stay, you know, kind of relatively consistent and doesn't really blow any barn doors off or anything. But as far as benchmarks are concerned, the benchmarks absolutely love that little Mars. So yeah, there we go. The next thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this all in front of you as well. It's all very much a live review, this one. I'm going to close all my doodahs down, and then I'm going to show you the GPU tweak software. I'm going to have to zoom you in a bit, but I'm going to wait for the program to start up because it's not the fastest thing in the world. And then I'm going to hit GPU info, and then down here you'll see that I'm going to hit monitor, and eventually it will go pop, and it will pop up with the monitor side of things. Please, there we go. Right, so now I'm going to zoom you in. So there we go, we've got a lovely up close look of it now. So essentially you've got your own version of like a tarty afterburner, and then you've got a GPU-Z nailed on the side. Now the only thing that it doesn't have compared to GPU-Z, if I open GPU-Z now, it doesn't have the little sensors tab. And with the sensors tab, generally what I end up doing is going down and putting highest reading, GPU temperature, highest reading, fan speed, highest reading, fan speed RPM, highest reading. Now you may think, Tom, why are you being so, you know, anal with that? No, I need to check that I can still see it on the screen. Can you see it all? No, you can't see any of it. Right, so we'll pop that open a little bit. There we go, and I'm also going to turn this monitor off. I'm going to turn that off as well. And I'm just hoping that the camera will sort itself out so that we can actually, you'll be able to see things properly. I don't know whether that's going to make any difference to the final edit because my camera screen is a little bit poo. But anyway, we will just live in hope. Anyway, right, so back to the actual point here. Okay, now don't forget, Silicon Lottery, you do have to remember that my overclocking settings, you know, might not work for you. Mine might be slightly better than yours. It also might be slightly worse. One thing I will say is when you do your overclocking, if you do buy one of these and you smash the offset up a little bit, what you do need to do after you click apply, it won't apply onto the GPU-Z, and it's like it's not worked properly. What you have to do is go up, and you see as I hovered over that Mars bit, then it brought up that little extra tab, and what you have to do is hit sync all cards. And if you do that, down here in a second, the GPU-Z, as it's just done, is just added the overclock. So that's just something you need to kind of get used to. It's like an extra step that you need to do compared to what you would do normally. Now you've got profiles down here that you can save overclocks to if you want. In the settings, you've also got, you can start it automatically when Windows starts. Now, one thing I will say about this feature is make sure your overclock is 100% stable before you enable this. Because for argument's sake, if you're running a benchmark and it freezes and it black screens, it will, when Windows starts again, it will add that overclock straight away. So at those points in time, and I have done it in the past, I have had one of these ticked in the past with other cards and stuff, and the overclock hasn't been that stable, and then when Windows starts, all I end up keep getting is black screens, and then you're into a whole world of drivers on and off and stuff like that to try and get it to work again. So just make sure your overclock's stable before you get it to start with Windows, and also add your overclock on as well. In here you've got the tune settings. You can you've got lots of tick settings for what you want it to display. We've got it to display near enough everything at the moment. Maximum GPU voltage, memory clock, power target, GPU temp target, fan speed, you know, there's everything there. You can get it to, there's updates you can do, and you can set hotkeys up. And yeah, there's that doesn't really do anything, to be fair. But then if we go back to tuning, you've got the options down the left hand side, and for argument's sake, GPU temp target, if you wanted to run your GPU at, let's say, 70, you can manually say, I want it to run at 70 degrees, and it will just alter the fan profile. So as it starts to get up to 70 degrees, it will start to spin the fans up a little bit more. Your GPU voltages is there. It actually moves up quite quickly when you start to tick it, and it doesn't go up by a massive amount. You can go up from 1200 up to 1212. I didn't actually go above 1205 when I was doing mine. I found going further did nothing for me, but again, work those type of things out for yourself. Your boost clock, again, at the top goes up in 10 degrees notches, but also what you do need to remember, and I'm just going to set something really quickly. Oh crikey, I'm just going to set something real quick, is if you do an offset, you need to remember that over here it will say one thing, and then on the GPU core clock, what the actual highest will be, it will be another, because GPU boost 2 will still boost it up that little bit further. So at the moment it says our core clock is 1157, and then over here it's got the boost would go from a stock of 1072 up to a boost of 1222, which is what we'll expect this to go to in the end. And if we were to run a benchmark or something, this is the one to watch, which is why I always have the sensors bit open so that I can, you know, notice and stuff. And sometimes it will even go past that boost. It will go that little bit further. I've had this card running at practically 1300 megahertz on the GPU boost side of things. It's actually been quite a little cracker when it comes to overclocking. But that's that side of things. We've seen the benchmark scores. It's now time for us to move on and actually getting this all wrapped up in a nice big juicy conclusion, because there is loads to say. Okay then, boys and girls, we've made it to the conclusion. So, first things first, as we always do, we're going to talk about the award, and I'm going to give it the Performance Award. And now I'm going to kind of explain to you why. Now, as you've seen in the graphs and stuff, this thing put out some numbers that even I wasn't particularly prepared for. When you look at the spec sheets, you kind of look and you go, oh, 780, okay. And it was kind of where I was expecting it to kind of yomp in anyway. But they did upgrade that memory bus. But the thing that I wasn't prepared for was the fact it was chucking, what I will say, near as damn it on most of the results, were 780 Ti scores and 780 Ti frames per second. Now, frames per second straight away, I want to say that Asus were shouting from the rooftops, oh, it's going to be all about the minimum frames per second with this. And they were better than you may have expected, but they were not like, you know, jaw drop, shock, anything like that. They were good, but they weren't as good as the amount of time that they spent telling me about it. So minimum frames per second is all right. There's not a humongous amount of stutter there, I will give them that. Sometimes with dual GPU graphics you do get some fucking wild differences between the minimums and the maximums, and you know the average is a bit flaky. This was actually pretty good, to the point I will say it's one of the better dual GPU cards that I've had the pleasure to work with. Now this is where it does get confusing, or rather more complicated. Typical TTL style, it can never say anything quickly, but when it comes to the performance, it's kind of 780 Ti performance they're at. We've not even bothered looking at AMD cards, we've kept it, you know, between, you know, where we should. It's definitely quicker than a 780. Okay, now so that's kind of, we'll put that one to bed there. 780s, yeah, you can get them for less than 400 quid now. Now the bit where it does get confusing is two 760s, Mars 760, because I had a look about and prices do vary quite a bit. You can find some e-tailers selling selling a 760 for 205 quid, but then again some of them do go right the way up to 255 quid. And I'm not talking some of these dodgy bloody retailers either. I'm actually talking about very big UK names go up and above £250. So we're going to take the middle point and say that if you were to buy two 760s, you would be looking at spending 450 quid. And that would be Asus DCU2 ones like the cooler that we've got on here. Now, we do have to give Asus a kind of a little bit of give and take, because it is a custom PCB. It is, you know, something not necessarily limited, but it is niche. So you can't really expect something that's been designed from the ground up, you know, like this, to be the same price as two individual cards, which are essentially, you know, just kind of, you know, run of the mill, shove them out as quickly as possible as we can type cards, rather than this, which they know they're not going to sell, you know, as many as the normal 760 of, but it's got this epic cooler, which we've seen actually does work really well. The back plate, the light, you know, the fact that they've gone to a lot of effort to make sure this thing works properly. You can't argue with the benchmark or the gaming results. It does work really well as well. I'm not so sure whether it's I mean, we're talking about say a £70 difference. Now obviously you do run into a lot of problems when you start talking about dual cards. I personally like the look of dual cards, but I've seen people with them, you know, running right side by side each other on motherboards, because motherboards might not necessarily have a lot of distance between them. You always want a good 2 slots clear between them, so you do run into issues like that. If you've got a couple of graphics cards in your rig, then you can be running into problems with maybe you can't get a sound card on, or, you know, connectors from your power supply, and you do run into more and more issues. And it's at those points when you do have to kind of sit down and, you know, take everything apart and kind of really think really carefully. Does my rig support this? You know, do I what other stuff do I want to use? Layout. It does get confusing. At least with this, you can kind of fit it, forget it, bush bam, done, lovely jubbly. And you're not going to get a card that looks like that for 450 quid, because it is obviously the cheapest Mars they've ever made. Now we've not tested two 760s and SLI to kind of talk about, you know, performance and stuff, but it's something that I'm probably going to have to do in a not too distant future now to kind of see, you know, the validity of this. But obviously it is something that you can just, like I said, pick up, chuck in and not worry about. The fact that it is only dual slot as well, not massive triple slot like the other Mars is, or the fact that it's not two separate graphics cards, does open up other factors as well. If you were to, for example, argument's sake, be running this on the Matrix Gene, which is the M80X board, there is 2 slots there, but it does mean that you can have this in one and then a decent sound card like the Phoebus in another. If you were to then go even smaller, this card will fit in the Impact, which is the ITX board. ROG ITX, it would all match in with a theme, lovely bubbly jubbly. You wouldn't have to worry about anything else, and you're still going to get that dual card performance. But I can hear you shouting at the screen now. But Tom, you can get that kind of performance with the tie as well. And yes, you can. And this is where it does get very, very complicated, because with this thing, really, it's cheaper than the tie, so you can save yourself a little bit of money. You may run into issues with games, because there are still games out there now that don't see 2 cards. And by that, I mean you'll get the performance of one 760 from this, then you will 2. And there are still games out there that just won't see second cards. It's always a game issue more than a driver issue. Very, very limited, but I still want to kind of chuck it in there, because all I'm doing is giving you all the information I possibly can do. It's kind of like a brain fart. Everything comes out, and then you can then make your own mind up. But with the tie, obviously, yes, you can overclock it. But this for me is all about that kind of limited niche kind of fact that it is a Mars card. The looks, it does perform really well. It is a bit cheaper. I kind of see this personally as being a bit of a Marmite card. It's going to be one of those ones where people that like something a bit different, people that are into their hardware, people that may want to spend a little bit of, have got a bigger budget than most of us, may want something a bit different. So this could answer your prayers. I've got a Mars card rather than a 780 tie card, which everyone seems to be running out to buy at the minute. But at the same time, you could hate it because you'd rather spend 30 or 40 quid more and just go and buy a tie, and that's perfectly fine. But there's something in my experience on the internet, especially more recently, because it does seem to be getting worse, is that the people that have the loudest voices about either loving something or hating it are not actually the ones that may end up buying it in the first place. So we'll kind of leave this one out there to many of you. One thing I will say though is Asus are saying, because you can only run 2 760s in SLI, they've only got 1 tab. But this has a tab on it as well, meaning you can run 2 of them if you want. I will say that for benchmarks it will be great, but quad SLI is an absolute ball ache when it comes to gaming. I've actually seen games that will run worse than 1 dual GPU card when you put that second one in. Games just aren't really ready for that yet. One of the few games we ever saw that really worked well on multi GPU games was Crisis Warhead way back in the day. But more recently, Witcher seems to have really grabbed hold of those multi GPUs more. Now, without testing a second one of these, I can't say which ones will. But to be fair, by the time you've got to buying one of these, and then you're thinking about getting a second one, that is actually the point. I will tell you, don't buy 2 of these. Just go and buy 2 780 ties, because you'll run into much less driver problems. It'll probably be a much happier experience for you, long term. And that is the only point when I'll say, really, you don't want to be running 2 of these at all. I think you'll run into so many headaches. I've got a funny feeling Asus are now going to want to prove me wrong on that. So you may see me with a second one of these in a not too distant future. And I will be happy to test it if they want to send another one. But I think, one of these cards is going to be the sweet spot. I also think one of these cards on, as I said, the Gene or the Impact is also an epic sweet spot as well. Because you've still got the smallness, but on the Gene you can obviously get your Phoebus in. On the Impact you're getting all the Gucci kind of Mars ROG looks and everything in such a small form factor. I think it'll be amazing. When you get to something big and kind of meaty like this, it very much is all about that throbbing logo in the side and then smashing a graphics card, smashing a sound card in there somewhere. I do need to say about the overclocking, it did seem to overclock really well, and to the point when I looked at the results I was getting, the benchmarks, they were all going bop, 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 and they all went up, and that was epic. But the frames per second didn't seem to take so much of a grasp of the overclock that we would have expected. And that's really kind of an architecture limitation rather than it being, the overclock was iffy. Because when I saw that the frames per second wasn't really getting affected, I did back the overclock back a little bit, because sometimes if you push it too far, it can have a negative effect. I I tried that, didn't really make any difference whatsoever. So we come to the conclusion it's just the 760 architecture limitation more than anything else. But like I said, the benchmarks just went, and so that's brilliant. Also, something I was really surprised about was the temperatures of this cooler as well, because you can set it to 80 degrees and it will power to 80 degrees. But the cooler actually managed to keep my overclock stable as well. Now, generally when we do overclocks, we do ramp the fans up a bit just to take the thermal kind of limitations out of it and then run it. But then right at the very end, what I'll tend to do is I'll turn it back to auto and then run some of the benchmarks again to see if it starts falling over. Normally it does. This, it didn't. The fans did spin up a little bit more. I think it got up to like 55%. But they're not ridiculously intrusive, and we do have to kind of remember I'd overclocked this to the point where it was like just on the boundaries of being stable and not. There was we'd obviously increased the power that we were putting in it, we were asking more from it, and yet it still managed to keep those temperatures really well in check. And obviously, like this 780 and the 780 Ti is designed to run at 85 degrees, and you can turn that back if you want. But the fact that this has actually got 2 cores on it, and it still managed to keep those temperatures at a nice steady level was amazing. And one also thing that I'll say is if you want to run lower temperatures, you obviously can set that power slider down a little bit, and the fan speeds will go up a little bit more. So there's plenty of scope there for you to be able to tweak and stuff. And talking of tweaking, the only thing that I did look in GeForce Experience before people say is the throbbing logo. We need a little bit in the Asus GPU tweak to be able to either turn that off or just set it manually on, because I like it, but I fucking hate it throbbing. I just like to have it just lit up red, because I like it in there, but when I was doing the benchmarking and trying to play the games and stuff, I kept finding it catching my eye and me looking over at it because it was wab. So yeah, that side of it I didn't particularly like. So that would be one of the aesthetic changes that I would personally like them to. It's got to be just a switch somewhere that they can add to the BIOS, and yeah, please let us have that. But that's why we gave it Performance Award. We basically said if this come in at 499, then we would have given it a gold award. But the fact that it tipped that £500 marker, that was the point that we kind of collectively sat around and said, no, it's a little bit too expensive. We're going to give it a bit of a kick for the price. But the performance is still there, so it does still deserve that the red award. But one thing that we do need to say at this kind of really early stage is it is only the manufacturer price. Once it gets in a channel and the e-tailers start fighting it out, you may see that price drop down below 500 quid. And then if it does, it's very much a gold-worthy graphics card, but still only if you're going to buy one of them. So essentially what I would think about this is it's a tarty alternative to the Ti, because at the moment there's only reference versions of that, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's a bloody good looking graphics card. But this is a tarty alternative for the Ti. For those of you that don't want to be a bit of a sheep and buy the same thing that everybody else is going to do, Asus have brought you a very quirky and niche option to be able to, you know, maybe confuse matters or even make things easier for you. But anyway, I am going to love you and leave you. That is the Performance Award winning Asus Mars 760. And I have been, will be, and hopefully always will be, Tiny Tom Logan. But for now at least, that's another rather random video for you out. Ding! Did I do it late? Ding! No, that one, Tom. Ding! Ding! There we go. I got there in the end.